You're not welcome here anymore. Don't come back. We've made our decision. That was my mother's voice. Calm. Even. Practiced. She left it in a 28-second voicemail at 10:12 p.m. on a Thursday night, like she was confirming a dentist appointment instead of erasing me from her life. No argument beforehand. No warning. No build-up. Just a message that landed in my inbox like a verdict already signed. I sat there on my couch in my one-bedroom apartment in Seattle, Washington, phone still in my hand, listening to it again because my brain refused to accept that those words had actually come out of her mouth. I played it a second time, slower this time, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen as if maybe I'd missed something the first time. A reason. An explanation. A single sentence that connected the decision to anything I had done. There was nothing. Just the ending. If that hits you the way it hit me, take a second right now and subscribe to Women Reddit Stories, and drop your city and time in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know where you're listening from. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 31 years old. And that voicemail wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the moment everything finally became clear. Because what my family didn't understand when they sent that message was that I wasn't just their son. I was their infrastructure. And within 72 hours, everything they had built on top of me stopped working. But to understand how we got there, you need to go back to that Thursday night. I hadn't done anything unusual that day. Work had run late, like it always did. I was a financial compliance analyst for a mid-sized firm downtown, the kind of job where you spend most of your time looking for problems no one else notices until they become disasters. It was quiet work. Detailed work. The kind that trains your brain to see patterns whether you want to or not. By the time I got home, it was already dark. Seattle in November does that to you, turns 5 in the evening into something that feels like midnight. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, loosened my tie, and sat down on the couch with my laptop, planning to finish one last report before calling it a night. That's when my phone buzzed. One missed call. Mom. That alone wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the voicemail. My mother didn't leave voicemails. If she needed something, she texted. Usually short. Direct. Efficient. Call me. Need help. Are you busy? Voicemails were reserved for other people. People she didn't expect immediate access to. Not me. So I stared at the notification for a second longer than I should have before tapping it. And then I heard her voice. Flat. Measured. Controlled. Daniel, this is your mother. We've talked as a family, and we think it's best if you don't come back here anymore. Don't call. Don't visit. We're moving forward without you. Please respect that. Click. No hesitation. No emotion. Just closure. I remember sitting there with the phone still pressed to my ear after it ended, like maybe there was more coming, like maybe she had hit pause instead of stop. Nothing came. The room felt different after that. Not louder. Not quieter. Just empty in a way that didn't make sense. For a few seconds, I did what I'd always done. I opened my messages. Scrolled to her name. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, ready to type something automatic. Something familiar. What did I do wrong? Can we talk? I'm sorry. That had been the pattern for as long as I could remember. Fix first, understand later. But something didn't line up. Not with the tone of her voice. Not with the timing. And not with what I had been working on just hours earlier. Because earlier that afternoon, I had been reviewing a set of documents that had nothing to do with my job and everything to do with my family. Numbers I'd been avoiding organizing for years. Payments I'd been making without question. Accounts I'd set up to help. Responsibilities that had slowly become permanent. I lowered my thumb. closed the message window. And instead, I typed a single word. Okay. I added a period. Then I hit send. The message was delivered almost instantly. And then nothing. No typing bubble. No callback. No follow-up. Just silence. Which told me everything I needed to know. She expected me to chase. To question. To negotiate my way back into a place I had already been removed from. And when I didn't, there was no next step in her script. I set the phone down on the coffee table and leaned back into the couch, staring at the ceiling while my brain started doing what it always does when something doesn't make sense. It started building a model. Patterns. Timelines. Cause and effect. Because decisions like that don't come out of nowhere. They get built. And somewhere in the background, pieces had already been moving. I got up, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. Not for work this time. For something I should have done years ago. I created a new spreadsheet. Title, Family Financial Commitments, D. Harper. Column A, Item. Column B, Monthly Amount. Column C, Duration. Column D, Total. At first, it felt unnecessary. Then I started typing. Mortgage support for my parents' house in Tacoma, $1,600 a month. 3 years. Health insurance gap coverage after my dad lost his job, $540 a month. 2 years. My younger brother Kyle's truck payment, $410 a month. 11 months. Utilities I'd been covering temporarily that never stopped. Emergency expenses that weren't really emergencies anymore. Dental bills. Credit card bailouts. Short-term help that quietly became permanent obligations. The numbers filled the screen faster than I expected. By midnight, I had a list. By 1:30 a.m., I had totals. I leaned back in my chair and stared at the bottom cell. $128,430. I blinked. Then leaned forward and checked it again. Same number. Over $100,000. Given. Not loaned. Not documented. Not acknowledged. Just absorbed. And the strangest part wasn't the number. It was how normal it had felt while it was happening. I rubbed my eyes and opened the folder where I kept scanned copies of anything remotely important. Contracts. Statements. Agreements. I had always been organized. It was part of the job. Part of how I stayed in control. Which is when I found it. Not the payments. Not the accounts. Something else. Something I hadn't thought about in months. My name. On everything. Cosigner on the mortgage. Authorized user on multiple credit lines. Primary contact on the utility accounts. And one detail that made me sit up straighter than anything else that night. I was the sole trustee of a family fund my grandfather had set up before he passed. $92,000. Intended for medical expenses and family support, managed by me because, in his words, I was the only one who understands how money actually works. Every major financial thread in my family's life ran through me. And they had just told me not to come back. I closed the laptop slowly. Not because I was overwhelmed. Because for the first time, everything made sense. That voicemail wasn't random. It wasn't emotional. It was timed. And whatever was happening behind the scenes had already started before I ever pressed play. I reached for my phone again, looked at the message I had sent. Okay. 5 letters. A period. Simple. Final. And for them, it probably looked like surrender. What they didn't understand yet was that it was permission. Just not for them. For me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was upset in the way people expect, not pacing or crying or replaying the voicemail on a loop, but because my mind had already shifted into something else entirely. The same mode I used at work when a set of numbers didn't reconcile or when a transaction pattern looked just slightly off. It wasn't emotional. It was investigative. By 2 a.m., I was back at my desk, the glow of my laptop the only light in the apartment, and I started going deeper into the spreadsheet I'd built. Not just totals this time. Details. Dates. Sources. Where the money came from and where it went. I opened my bank statements going back 3 years, cross-referencing transfers with messages, emails, and notes I had written to myself at the time. What started as a list turned into a timeline, and what that timeline showed wasn't generosity. It was a dependency. Structured, consistent, and quietly escalating. At first, it was small. A couple $100 here. A bill there. Always framed the same way. Just this once. We'll figure it out next month. You're doing so well, we just need a little help getting through this. But there was no next month. There was no adjustment. There was only expansion. By 3 a.m., I had mapped out not just what I'd given, but how it had grown, like watching a graph that never dips, only climbs. And then I noticed something else. A shift. About 4 months earlier. The tone of the requests had changed. Less asking. More assuming. Messages like, "Hey, the mortgage is coming up. You've got the insurance this month, right? Kyle's payment is due Friday." No question marks. No hesitation. Just expectation. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, and for a moment I felt something sharp press into my chest, not anger exactly, but recognition. This wasn't supported anymore. This was infrastructure. And infrastructure doesn't get thanked. It gets used. I closed the spreadsheet and opened my email. That's when I found the first piece of something that didn't belong. Subject line, account contact update confirmation. I frowned. Opened it. Your contact email for the Harper Household Utilities account has been successfully updated. Timestamp, 3 days ago. 3 days before the voicemail. I read it again. Then again slower. The email address listed wasn't mine. It was Kyle's. My younger brother. I sat there for a second, letting that settle into place, and then I logged into the utility account directly. Sure enough, the primary contact had been changed. My access was still there, but it had been downgraded. Secondary. I hadn't authorized that. I knew I hadn't. I never would have. I felt something in my stomach tighten, not panic, not fear, but that quiet, precise awareness that something had already started moving without me. I opened another account. Then another. Same pattern. Small changes. Contact information updated. Notification settings altered. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that would trigger an immediate alert. But enough to shift control. And every single change dated within the last week. I reached for my coffee, took a sip, and realized it had gone completely cold. I didn't notice. Because by then, the pattern had fully formed in my head. Step 1, adjust access. Step 2, reassign visibility. Step 3, remove me. The voicemail wasn't the decision. It was the announcement. And announcements only happen after the work is already done. I leaned forward again, fingers resting on the keyboard, and pulled up the mortgage account. This one mattered more than anything else. The house in Tacoma wasn't just a place they lived. It was the largest financial structure tying all of us together. I logged in. Everything looked normal at first. Balance. Payment history. Next due date. Then I clicked into account details. And there it was. A pending request. Loan contact authorization update, processing. Submitted by Kyle Harper. Role listed, authorized family representative. I stared at the screen for a long second. Then I opened the attached document. It was a standard authorization form. Clean. Formatted. Professional. At the bottom, 2 signature lines. One for my father. One for me. My father's signature looked normal. Mine was close. Close enough that someone who didn't know me wouldn't question it. But I knew my own handwriting the way you know your own voice. The D in Daniel was wrong. I always left a slight upward tail at the end. This one stopped short. The loop in the P in Harper was too tight. Subtle differences. Small. But undeniable. Someone had signed my name. Without me. I didn't move right away. Didn't react. I just sat there, staring at the screen while the timeline in my head locked into place. First, they started shifting account access. Then they prepared documentation. Then they submitted changes under my name. And only after all of that, they sent the voicemail. Remove the foundation quietly. Then announce that the building doesn't need it anymore. I exhaled slowly and closed the document. For a brief moment, something emotional tried to surface, anger, disbelief, something sharp enough to break through the calm. But it didn't last. Because emotion requires uncertainty. And I didn't feel uncertain anymore. I felt clear. I reached for my phone, not to call them, not to respond, but to check something else. The family group chat. Or at least, what used to be one. I searched for it. Nothing. Not archived. Not muted. Gone. I scrolled through my message list again just to be sure. Still nothing. Then I realized something I hadn't checked yet. Kyle's name. I opened our last conversation. Scrolled up. And saw the last message he had sent me 3 days ago. Hey, quick thing. Can you confirm your email for the utilities? Just making sure everything's updated. I hadn't responded. I must have been busy. It hadn't seemed important at the time. Now it was. Because that message wasn't a question. It was confirmation. He already knew what he was doing. He just needed to see if I'd notice. I locked my phone and set it down on the desk. The apartment was completely silent. No traffic outside. No voices. Just the faint hum of my laptop. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the empty street below. Seattle at that hour felt like a different city. Still. Detached. Like everything had paused for a moment. And in that pause, one thought settled in with absolute clarity. This wasn't a family falling apart. This was a plan. And not a good one. Because the one thing they hadn't accounted for. I do this for a living. I find problems. I trace patterns. And I stop things before they become irreversible. I turned away from the window, went back to my desk, and opened a new tab. Not for work. For something I had avoided for years because I didn't think I'd ever need it. A search. Real estate and trust attorney, Seattle. The results populated instantly. Names. Offices. Numbers. I stared at the list for a moment, then reached for a pen and a notepad, writing down the first name that appeared with consistent reviews and a specialization in exactly what I was dealing with. Rachel Whitaker. I tore the page off, folded it once, and set it next to my laptop. I didn't call right away. Not because I was unsure. Because I wanted to be certain. So I went back to the spreadsheet. Back to the documents. Back to the timeline. And I built it properly this time. Not as a record of what I had given. But as a case. Because if they were going to remove me from everything, they were about to find out exactly what everything actually was. Morning came without ceremony. No alarm. No sense of rest. Just a gray wash of light pushing through the blinds and the quiet awareness that everything I had seen the night before was still there, unchanged. I lay there for a few seconds, staring at the ceiling, letting the reality settle into place again, not as a shock this time, but as fact. Then I got up. No hesitation. No second guessing. I made coffee, sat down at my desk, and opened my laptop like I was starting a normal workday, except this time the file in front of me wasn't a client portfolio. It was my family. I reviewed everything again, slower this time, not looking for confirmation, but for precision. The spreadsheet. The account changes. The forged authorization form. The timestamps. Every piece aligned the same way it had the night before. Clean. Consistent. Deliberate. By the time I finished, there was only one thing left to do. I picked up my phone and dialed the number I had written down. Rachel Whitaker's office. It rang twice before someone answered. Whitaker Legal Group, this is Melissa. Hi, I said, my voice steady, more steady than I expected. My name is Daniel Harper. I need to speak with Rachel Whitaker regarding a potential case involving a forged signature and unauthorized financial changes on a co-signed mortgage and a family trust. There was a brief pause. Not confusion. Recognition. I can connect you, she said. One moment. The line clicked. 30 seconds later, a different voice came on. Clear. Direct. Controlled. Daniel, this is Rachel Whitaker. I understand you may have a time-sensitive situation. I do, I said. And I have documentation. Good, she replied without hesitation. Come in this morning. Bring everything. That was it. No probing questions. No small talk. Just direction. By 9:15 a.m., I was walking into her office in downtown Seattle, a glass-front building that reflected the overcast sky back onto itself. Inside, everything was clean lines and quiet efficiency. Rachel Whitaker was exactly what you'd expect from someone who handles problems like mine. Mid-40s, composed, sharp without being intimidating. The kind of person who doesn't waste time pretending something is less serious than it is. She didn't offer me coffee. Didn't try to make the room comfortable. She just gestured to the chair across from her desk. Show me. I placed the folder down. Everything I had. The spreadsheet. The account change confirmations. The mortgage authorization form. She started with the form. No reaction at first. Just careful observation. She pulled a pen from her desk, placed the forged signature next to my real one from an older document I had printed, and compared them in silence. Then she leaned back slightly. That's not your signature, she said. No. Good, she replied. I frowned slightly. Good. Yes, she said calmly. Because that means this is fraud, not a misunderstanding. She tapped the paper once. Forgery involving financial instruments tied to real estate. That's not a small issue. She moved to the next document. The mortgage account. The pending authorization. The name attached. Kyle Harper. She didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then she looked up at me. Who submitted this? My younger brother. And the voicemail? My mother. Timing? 3 days after this was submitted. She nodded once. No surprise. Just confirmation. Then she folded her hands on the desk. Daniel, you have 2 immediate problems and 1 very significant advantage. I didn't interrupt. I let her continue. Problem 1, she said, tapping the authorization form. Someone has submitted a document bearing your forged signature to gain control over a financial account you are legally tied to. That alone is actionable. She tapped the mortgage account printout. Problem 2. There is an active attempt to modify or control a loan you co-signed without your consent. If that proceeds, it could impact your credit, your liability, and your ownership rights. She paused. Then leaned forward slightly. Your advantage is simple. I felt my posture shift without thinking. You are still on everything, she said. The mortgage. The accounts. And more importantly, you said you're the sole trustee of a family fund? Yes. How much? 92,000. She nodded again. Then nothing moves without you. The words landed with a weight that felt stabilizing. Not empowering. Not exciting. Just grounding. Here's what that means, she continued. They can attempt to change things. They can submit documents. They can even lie. She tapped the desk lightly. But they cannot complete anything that requires your legal authorization without your actual signature. I let that sink in. Because for the first time since the voicemail, I wasn't just reacting. I was positioned. What are my options? I asked. She didn't hesitate. We move immediately. She reached for a legal pad and began writing. Step 1. We notify the mortgage lender of a suspected forged document. That triggers an internal investigation and freezes any pending changes. She wrote another line. Step 2. You revoke any automatic payments you've been making voluntarily. As cosigner, you are not obligated to continue covering for the primary borrower indefinitely. Another line. Step 3. You place a full administrative freeze on the trust. As trustee, that's entirely within your authority. She looked up. And step 4, she said, her tone slightly sharper now, we send formal notice to your family that all financial involvement is being withdrawn and that any further communication goes through me. The room felt very quiet after that. Not tense. Just clear. I glanced down at the list she had written. Each step simple. Direct. Final. What happens to them? I asked. She leaned back slightly. Without your financial support, she said, everything they've built that depends on you becomes unstable. How unstable? That depends on how much they've been relying on you. I thought about the spreadsheet. The $128,000. The monthly payments. The patterns. They can't maintain it, I said. She held my gaze. Then it won't be maintained. There was no judgment in her voice. No sympathy. Just fact. I exhaled slowly. What about the forgery? I asked. That's your choice, she said. You can pursue it criminally, which would escalate things significantly, or you can use it as leverage to stop what's happening. I nodded. Not deciding yet. Just understanding. She slid the legal pad across the desk toward me. If you want to proceed, she said, sign here and restart today. I looked at the paper. At my name printed neatly at the top. At the space waiting for my signature. And for a brief moment, something flickered. Not doubt. Not hesitation. Just the awareness that once I signed that page, everything would move. There would be no quiet resolution. No going back to how things were. But then I thought about the voicemail. Don't come back. We're moving forward without you. I picked up the pen. Signed my name. Clean. Deliberate. Exact. Rachel took the paper, glanced at it once, and then set it aside. Good, she said. We'll start with the lender. She reached for her computer. And just like that, the first piece moved. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just a quiet shift that would, in a matter of days, start unraveling everything they had tried to build without me. I stood up to leave. Daniel, she said before I reached the door. I turned. They think they're removing you, she said. I waited. They're about to find out what you were holding up. I nodded once. Then walked out into the cold Seattle air. And for the first time since I pressed play on that voicemail, I wasn't trying to understand what had happened. I was preparing for what would happen next. The first move didn't feel like anything. No dramatic moment. No immediate reaction. Just a quiet email sent at 11:42 a.m. from Rachel's office to the mortgage lender, attaching the forged document, my affidavit, and a formal request to halt any pending authorization changes. If you had looked at my life from the outside that afternoon, nothing had changed. I went back to work. Sat at my desk. Answered emails. Reviewed compliance reports. But underneath all of that, something had shifted. Not emotionally. Structurally. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't reinforcing the system that depended on me. I was withdrawing from it. And systems don't react immediately when you remove a support beam. They hold for a moment. Then they start to settle. Then they crack. By the time I got home that evening, Rachel had already sent the second notice. Automatic payments, revoked. Every recurring transfer I had set up tied to the house, the insurance, the utilities, terminated effective immediately. Clean. Documented. Final. The third step happened the next morning. Friday. I took an early lunch and drove to the bank that managed my grandfather's trust. It was the same branch I had walked into years earlier when the account was first established, back when everything still felt simple. Back when being the responsible one sounded like a compliment instead of a job description. The building hadn't changed. Same neutral carpeting. Same quiet air. Same faint smell of paper and polished wood. I sat down across from a trust officer named Mark Ellison, a man in his early 50s with a calm demeanor and the kind of careful professionalism that comes from handling other people's money all day. He reviewed my documents in silence. My ID. The trust agreement. Rachel's letter confirming my legal authority. Then he looked up. "You're listed as the sole trustee," he said. "That's correct. No co-trustees. No secondary authorization holders." "No." He nodded slowly. "What would you like to do today, Mr. Harper?" I didn't rush the answer. Not because I didn't know. Because I wanted to hear it clearly when I said it. "I want to place a full administrative freeze on the trust," I said. "No withdrawals, no transfers, no distributions of any kind until further notice." He didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked like he had heard that sentence before, just not often. "Any specific reason?" he asked. "I have concerns about potential unauthorized access or misuse." That was enough. He turned to his computer, typed for a moment, then printed a form and slid it across the desk. "Sign here," he said. I picked up the pen. For a brief second, I noticed something almost ironic. The importance of a real signature. After everything that had been done with a fake one. I signed. Mark reviewed it, nodded once, and stamped the document. "That's it," he said. "The account is now frozen. No activity can occur without your direct written authorization and verification." "Thank you." I stood up, shook his hand, and walked out. Outside, the air was colder than it had been the day before. Or maybe I was just noticing it more. Because something inside me felt lighter. Not relieved. Not satisfied. Just unburdened. Like I had set something down that I didn't realize I had been carrying for years. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, hands in my coat pockets, and let that feeling settle. This wasn't revenge. I hadn't taken anything from them. I had just stopped giving. And already, I could feel the shift. Saturday came and went quietly. No calls. No messages. No reaction. Which told me exactly where they were in the timeline. They didn't know yet. The payments hadn't been missed long enough to trigger alerts. The lender hadn't contacted them. The trust hadn't been accessed. They were still operating under the assumption that everything was normal. That the system was still intact. Sunday night, I sat at my kitchen counter, laptop open, reviewing my own finances for the first time in years without factoring in anyone else's needs. The difference was noticeable. Numbers that used to disappear every month were still there. Staying. Accumulating. I transferred money into a savings account. Not because I had to. Because I could. And that simple act felt more significant than anything I had done all week. Monday morning, everything changed. I was halfway through a report at work when my phone buzzed. A call. Kyle. I didn't answer. It rang out. Then again. And again. 3 calls in less than 5 minutes. Then the text started. Hey, call me. Something's wrong with the mortgage account. Did you change something? I read them. Didn't respond. Because I knew what had just happened. The lender had reached out. The freeze had gone into effect. The first crack had formed. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. Mom. I watched it ring. Let it go to voicemail. A message came through almost immediately. Daniel, I don't know what you did, but the bank just called. They said something about documents being flagged. You need to call me back right now. Her tone was different. Not calm. Not rehearsed. This time, there was urgency. I set the phone down. Finished the paragraph I was writing. Saved the file. Then leaned back in my chair and finally looked at the screen again. More notifications. Dad. 2 missed calls. Then a text. Son, please call us. There's an issue with the house. Issue. I almost smiled at that. Because for years, I had been the solution. Now I was the issue. And they didn't know how to process that yet. The emails came next. One from the mortgage lender. Confirmation that the account was under review due to a reported discrepancy. Another from the utilities provider. Notification of updated contact restrictions and pending verification. And then one more. From a name I didn't recognize. A lawyer. Subject line, urgent, Harper property matter. I opened it. Mr. Harper. I represent your parents, Robert and Linda Harper, regarding the residential property in Tacoma. We have been informed that certain financial actions have been taken which are impacting their ability to maintain the property. We would like to arrange a conversation to resolve this matter as soon as possible. There appears to be a serious issue requiring immediate attention. I read that last line again. A serious issue. I leaned back in my chair. And for a moment, I let myself feel it. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just the quiet, undeniable shift in balance. Because 3 days ago, I had been the one expected to fix everything. To respond immediately. To carry whatever problem landed in front of me. Now. They were the ones asking. I picked up my phone, opened the email, and forwarded it to Rachel. Then I typed one line. Let's schedule a meeting. I hit send. Set the phone down. And went back to work. Because whatever happened next wasn't going to be handled over the phone. It was going to happen in a room. With documents. With evidence. With no space left for rewriting the story. And I was ready for that room. The calls didn't stop. They multiplied. By Tuesday morning, my phone had become something I barely recognized, not a tool, not a convenience, but a constant vibration of urgency that I had spent years training myself to respond to immediately. Only now, I wasn't responding. And that changed everything. I woke up to 27 missed calls. Kyle. Mom. Dad. Unknown numbers I could already guess the origin of. There were texts stacked on top of each other, each one more urgent than the last. Kyle, Daniel, seriously, what did you do? The account is locked. Kyle, the bank said there's an investigation. Why would you do that? Kyle, call me back. This isn't funny. Mom, you need to fix this today. Mom, your father hasn't slept. The bank is saying things that don't make sense. Mom, this is your responsibility. Dad, son, please call. We need to talk about the house. Dad, this is getting serious. I sat on the edge of my bed and read each message carefully. Not quickly. Not emotionally. Just cataloging. Because there was something important in the way they were speaking. No one asked why I had done it. No one mentioned the voicemail. No one acknowledged removing me. It was all framed the same way. A problem had appeared. And I was expected to solve it. That pattern had survived everything. Even this. I stood up, got dressed, and went to work like any other day. Because that was the part they would never understand. My life didn't stop when theirs became unstable. At 10:14 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Kyle. This time, I answered. Not because I felt obligated. Because I wanted to hear it. Daniel, finally, he said immediately, his voice tight, rushed. What is going on? The bank froze everything. They're saying there's fraud on the account. Did you tell them something? I did, I said calmly. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough for the words to land. Why would you do that? He asked, disbelief pushing through his tone. We're trying to refinance. You're messing everything up. I leaned back in my chair, looking out the window at the gray Seattle skyline. No, I said. I stopped something that shouldn't have been happening. What are you talking about? He snapped. We had authorization. You submitted a document with my name on it. Yeah, because I didn't sign it. Silence. Not confusion. Recognition. I let it sit there. Didn't fill it. Didn't soften it. You're overreacting, he said finally, but his voice had changed, lost some of its edge. It was just to move things forward. Mom said. Mom told you to sign my name? Another pause. Longer this time. That's not what I'm saying, he replied, but the confidence was gone now. We're just trying to fix things. You're making this way bigger than it needs to be. I nodded slightly, even though he couldn't see me. Bigger than forging a legal document? I asked. That's not, he stopped himself. Look, man, can you just undo whatever you did? The bank is saying the refinance is frozen. We can't keep the current payments like this. There it was. Not an apology. Not an explanation. A request. Fix it. Return to your role. Carry it again. No, I said. The word landed heavier than I expected. Flat. Final. What do you mean no? He asked, his voice rising now. You can't just pull out like this. That's not how this works. It is now. Daniel, this is the house, he said, like that alone should change everything. Mom and Dad are going to lose it if this doesn't get sorted. I closed my eyes for a second. Not from guilt. From clarity. They told me not to come back, I said. I'm respecting that. That's not, he exhaled sharply. People say things when they're upset. You know how Mom gets. And you know how documents work. Silence again. Then frustration. You're being selfish, he said, the word coming out sharper now. Like seriously, this is selfish. You're putting all of us in a bad position just to prove a point. I almost smiled. Because there it was. The word they always used when I stopped giving. Selfish. Not when I was covering their bills. Not when I was signing onto their debts. Not when I was absorbing every financial gap they created. Only when I stopped. I'm not proving a point, I said. I'm stepping out. You can't just step out, he insisted. You're part of this. No, I said quietly. I was. The line went silent. For a moment, I thought he had hung up. Then I heard it. A shift. Not in words. In tone. Daniel, he said, slower now. We need you. I didn't respond right away. Because that sentence was honest. More honest than anything he had said so far. Not dressed up. Not disguised. Just truth. But it came too late. You needed me before, I said. You just didn't say it like that. That's not fair, he replied quickly. It's accurate. Another pause. Then, quieter. What are we supposed to do? I looked back at my laptop. At the work waiting for me. At the life that had been paused for years while I held theirs together. I don't know, I said. That's not my role anymore. He exhaled, long and frustrated. So that's it, he asked. You're just done. Yes. The word came easier this time. Stronger. There was nothing left to negotiate. Nothing left to explain. You're going to regret this, he said, his voice tightening again, reaching for control where it had already been lost. Maybe, I said. But it'll be my decision. He didn't respond. The line went dead a second later. No goodbye. No resolution. Just silence. I set the phone down on my desk and sat there for a moment, letting the conversation settle. Not replaying it. Not analyzing it. Just acknowledging what it was. The first time I had said no and meant it all the way through. And more importantly, the first time they had heard it. My phone buzzed again almost immediately. Mom this time. I let it ring. Watched the screen light up. Then fade. A voicemail came in seconds later. I didn't listen to it right away. Because I already knew the pattern. Guilt. Pressure. Rewriting. Instead, I opened my email. There was a message from Rachel. Meeting confirmed. Friday, 2 p.m. My office. All parties present. I read it once. Then again. Friday. 3 days away. A room. A table. Documents. No interruptions. No emotional shortcuts. Just facts. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. Because everything up to this point. The calls. The messages. The pressure. None of it mattered anymore. What mattered was that room. And what would happen inside it. Because for the first time, they weren't going to control the narrative. And I wasn't going to carry it. I picked up my phone, opened Mom's voicemail, and hovered over the play button for a second. Then I locked the screen. Set it face down. And went back to work. Friday would be enough. Friday came faster than it should have. Not because the days moved quickly, but because everything between Tuesday and Friday felt like waiting for something that had already started. I didn't get many more calls after Wednesday. Not because they stopped caring. Because they realized it wasn't working. The messages changed instead. Shorter. More careful. Less demanding. Like they were trying to find a version of me that would respond. They didn't find one. By Friday morning, my phone was quiet. Not peaceful. Just still. And that stillness felt heavier than all the noise that came before it. I got up early. Not out of nerves. Out of habit. Showered. Dressed. Button-down shirt, dark jacket, nothing dramatic, just clean, neutral, deliberate. The kind of appearance that doesn't ask for attention but doesn't give anything away either. I picked up the folder I had prepared the night before. Everything was inside. The spreadsheet. The account records. The authorization form. Printed, labeled, organized. And in the back pocket, something I hadn't planned to use unless I needed to. A copy of the voicemail. Because I had listened to it once. Just once. And that had been enough. Rachel's office was quiet when I arrived. Same as before. Controlled. Intentional. She was already there, seated at the conference table instead of behind her desk this time, her laptop open, legal pad beside it. Ready? She asked. Yes. No extra words. No reassurance. Just acknowledgement. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Not awkward. Just waiting. At 1:58 p.m., the door opened. My mother walked in first. Linda Harper. She looked exactly the way she always did when she wanted control. Chin slightly raised. Expression neutral. Composed in a way that took effort. But there was something else there too. Something underneath. Tension. She saw me immediately. Didn't smile. Didn't speak. Just took her seat across the table. My father followed. Robert Harper. Slower. Quieter. His eyes met mine for a second, and something flickered there, something closer to uncertainty than I had ever seen from him. Then Kyle. He came in last. Of course he did. His energy was different from both of them. Restless. Agitated. Like he had been holding something in and didn't know where to put it. Behind them, their attorney stepped in. Mid-50s, polished, professional, the kind of man who measures every word before he lets it leave his mouth. He shook Rachel's hand. Nodded at me. Then took his seat at the end of the table. 6 people. 1 table. No one spoke for a moment. Rachel broke the silence. Thank you all for coming, she said, her tone even, controlled. This meeting is to address the financial and legal issues currently affecting the Harper property and related accounts. As agreed, Daniel will present first. There will be no interruptions. She looked at their attorney. He nodded once. Agreement. Structure. I opened my folder. Placed 6 copies of the spreadsheet on the table. 1 in front of each person. 1 for Rachel. 1 for their attorney. And 1 in front of myself. I didn't rush. I didn't dramatize. I just let the paper settle in front of them. I'm going to start with a number, I said. My voice sounded steady. Clear. Even. No edge. No emotion. Just fact. $128,430. No one moved. That's what I've contributed to this family over the past 3 years, I continued. Mortgage support. Insurance. Utilities. Vehicle payments. Emergency expenses. I gestured lightly toward the page. Every line is documented. Dates, amounts, account records. It's all there. My mother's eyes moved down the sheet. Slowly. My father didn't look up from the number. Kyle shifted in his seat. Their attorney leaned forward slightly, reading. This isn't a loan, I said. There's no contract. No repayment structure. This was given because I was asked, and because I believe that's what I was supposed to do. I paused. Not for effect. For clarity. That stopped this week. My mother inhaled sharply. Not loud. But noticeable. Rachel raised a hand slightly. No interruptions. I reached into the folder and pulled out the next document. 2 pages. Side by side. I placed them in the center of the table. My signature, I said, pointing to the first page. From the original mortgage documents. Then the second. And this, Is the signature submitted on an authorization form 3 days before I received a voicemail telling me not to come back. I let that sit. No explanation. No accusation. Just presence. Their attorney leaned in closer. Studied the pages. His expression didn't change, but his posture did. Slightly tighter. More focused. That document, I continued, was submitted under Kyle Harper's name as authorized family representative. Kyle straightened immediately. That's not, he started. Rachel didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Mr. Harper, she said, calm and firm. You'll have an opportunity to speak. He stopped. Barely. But he stopped. I looked at him. Not aggressively. Not emotionally. Just directly. I didn't sign that, I said. Silence. Heavy this time. Not empty. Full. Because everyone in that room understood exactly what that meant. Their attorney leaned back slightly, exhaling through his nose, processing. My father closed his eyes for a brief second. And my mother. My mother didn't look at me. She looked at Kyle. What is he talking about? She asked. Her voice was lower now. Less controlled. Kyle shook his head quickly. That's not what this is, he said. It's being twisted. I didn't interrupt him. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't finished. I reached into the folder again. This time, I didn't pull out paper. I pulled out my phone. Set it on the table. Screen facing up. I'm going to play something, I said. Kyle froze. Not dramatically. But enough. A call, I continued. 2 months ago. I tapped the screen. The room filled with his voice. Clear. Recognizable. Unfiltered. Honestly, Daniel, it would just be easier if you weren't on the house or the trust. Things would move faster. I let it play. Didn't pause it. Didn't soften it. Once you're off everything, we can actually do what we need to do without all the complications. I stopped it there. Didn't need the rest. The silence that followed was different from the others. This one had weight. Finality. My mother's hand moved slowly from the table to her lap. My father didn't look up. Their attorney removed his glasses, setting them carefully on the table as if he needed a clearer view of the situation without them. Kyle didn't speak. Didn't move. Didn't even try. Because there was nothing left to say. I leaned back slightly in my chair. Not relaxed. Just done. I'm not here to argue, I said calmly. And I'm not here to negotiate what already happened. I looked at each of them. One by one. This is where things stand, I continued. The trust is frozen. The mortgage is under review. I've withdrawn from all financial obligations tied to this property and any related accounts. My voice didn't rise. Didn't sharpen. It stayed exactly the same. If you want to move forward, I said, you'll need to do it without me. I closed the folder. Not loudly. Just enough to signal the end. And for the first time since the meeting started, no one tried to stop me. Because the structure they had been relying on was already gone. I stood up before anyone else could. Not abruptly. Not dramatically. Just deliberately. The chair moved back with a soft scrape against the floor, the only sound in a room that had gone completely still. Daniel. My father's voice. I paused. Not because I was unsure. Because I wanted to hear what came next. I didn't know, he said. I turned slightly, not fully facing him, but enough to acknowledge that he was speaking. His hands were on the table now, fingers pressed together, like he was trying to hold something in place that had already slipped. I didn't know about the signature, he added. Or any of that. I nodded once. I believe you, I said. And I did. That wasn't the part that surprised me. What surprised me was that he stopped there. No defense. No excuse. Just that one sentence. But then my mother spoke. And the room shifted again. You're really going to do this? Linda said, her voice tighter now, the composure from earlier starting to crack. After everything we've done for you? There it was. The script. Familiar. Predictable. Almost comforting in how consistent it was. I turned fully this time. Met her eyes. What exactly have you done for me? I asked. Not aggressively. Not sarcastically. Just, directly. She blinked, like she hadn't expected the question. Raised you, she said quickly. Supported you. Gave you a home. And this is how you repay us? I let the words settle for a moment. Not dismissing them. Just placing them where they belonged. That's called being a parent, I said. Not a debt. Her expression tightened. That's not fair, she snapped. You think everything is about money. It's not. You're right, I said calmly. It's not about money. I gestured lightly toward the table. It's about trust. Silence. No one interrupted that. Money was just the part you needed me for, I continued. Trust was the part you broke. Kyle shifted in his seat, finally finding his voice again. This is getting blown way out of proportion, he said, trying to recover some ground. It was a mistake. We were trying to fix things. You're acting like we committed a crime. I looked at him. Held his gaze. You did, I said. No emphasis. No volume. Just fact. Their attorney cleared his throat quietly but didn't interrupt. Because there was nothing to correct. Kyle opened his mouth. Closed it. Looked at my mother. Then back at me. Then what do you want? He asked, frustration bleeding through now. What's the end goal here? I thought about that for a second. Not because I didn't know. Because I wanted to say it clearly. There isn't one, I said. That seemed to confuse him more than anything else I'd said so far. What do you mean there isn't one? I'm not trying to win anything, I said. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I'm not trying to prove a point. I paused. Then added. I'm just not participating anymore. That landed differently. Quieter. But heavier. My father leaned back slightly in his chair, exhaling slowly like something inside him had finally settled into place, even if he didn't like where it landed. My mother didn't move. Didn't speak. For the first time in my life. She didn't have a response ready. And that silence said more than anything she could have argued. I picked up my folder. Held it at my side. This is how it moves forward, I said. The trust will be transferred to a third-party management firm. The mortgage, you have 60 days to figure out your next steps. After that, I'm fully removed. I looked at their attorney. You'll receive everything in writing. He nodded. Professional. Measured. Already adjusting to the new reality. Then I looked at my father. I meant what I said, I added. I do love you. His expression shifted again. Softer this time. But I didn't stay there. Because love didn't change the structure. It didn't rewrite the past. And it didn't put me back in the position I had just stepped out of. I turned toward the door. Hand on the handle. And for a second, I felt it. Not doubt. Not regret. Just the weight of finality. Then I opened it. And walked out. The hallway outside felt quieter than it should have. Like the sound from that room hadn't followed me. Or maybe it just didn't matter anymore. I walked down the stairs instead of taking the elevator. Each step steady. Even. Unhurried. By the time I stepped outside, the air hit colder than I expected. Or maybe I was just noticing everything more clearly now. I stood there for a moment. Hands in my pockets. Breathing. And for the first time in years, there was no pressure. No expectation. No invisible responsibility waiting for me the second I checked my phone. Just space. Clean. Uncomplicated. Mine. The next few weeks unfolded exactly the way they had to. The mortgage refinance never went through. Without my authorization, it couldn't. The bank finalized their review and flagged the account for irregularities, which meant every future step required scrutiny they weren't prepared for. Payments lapsed. Not immediately, but predictably. Because the structure had never been built to stand without me. The trust was transferred within 10 days. A licensed fiduciary firm took over management, enforcing the original terms without exception. No access. No flexibility. No emotional leverage. Just rules. Clear. Unchangeable. Their attorney withdrew shortly after, citing inconsistencies. A polite way of saying the situation was no longer defensible. The house took longer. But not much. Without a cosigner, without stable payments, and with the refinance blocked, they had limited options. They listed it. Sold it. Closed that chapter the only way they could. I didn't attend. Didn't need to. My name was removed from the deed properly this time. With my actual signature. The way it should have been from the beginning. Life after that wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some big, cinematic transformation. It was quiet. Which, I realized, was the point. The money I used to send every month stayed in my account. My savings grew. I paid down debts I had ignored for years. Booked a trip without calculating who else might need something first. Simple things. Normal things. Things that used to feel unavailable. Kyle never called again. Not once. My mother tried. A few times. Short calls. Careful tone. No demands. No accusations. But also, no acknowledgement. Not of what happened. Not of what she said. It wasn't reconciliation. It was distance, with a softer edge. My father texted on my birthday. Happy birthday, son. That was it. No follow-up. No conversation. Just those 3 words. And somehow, that felt more honest than anything that had come before. I'm not telling you this so you pick sides. I'm not telling you this so you hate them. Because the truth is, they're not villains. They're people who got used to something working a certain way. And never questioned what it cost me to keep it working. Until it stopped. And me. I'm not the victim. Not anymore. I'm just someone who finally understood that being needed isn't the same as being valued. And that love, without respect, turns into obligation. So I'll ask you something. And I really want you to think about it. If the people who depend on you suddenly told you they don't need you anymore, would you fight to stay? Or would you finally let go? And see what happens when you do? If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Women Reddit Stories right now and drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and I want to know what you would have done. Because sometimes, the hardest thing to walk away from is the thing you've been holding together the longest.